It's nice to be sitting here on this warm afternoon at Kolkata in the city of joy. It's very difficult to hold a session after Usha Uthup. And I can already see that the audience has thinned down. This session is past, present, and we are going to show to you how history can be fun. In order to do that, I have with me three people with very interesting books. On my extreme right, I have Coady, whose book is called Props. Props. Then we have Prateek Dasgupta with his book Forgotten Footprints. And we have Sumanto Chattopadhyay, The English Nut, with stories of words and phrases. Now, many of you would wonder, what are these three different books doing here on this stage, sitting together, and attempting to show to you how history can be fun? So, let me start with Norm. Norm's book views history from a very different perspective. We know history as something which has been created by great men, or great men are created by history. Here he has a book where he talks about objects and the role of objects in shaping the course of history. Prateek Dasgupta reveals some startling facts which has been established, and he dismantles facts which have been established by academic and popular historians in the past. We'll get to know what they are through the course of this conversation. And Sumanto Chattopadhyay, he brings forward the origin of words and phrases which we use in our everyday life. So Norm, usually if somebody had to write a book and the idea of a book had to generate in one's mind, they would not think in the terms that you have thought about objects being more important than people we know. For instance, Julius Caesar, so that diadem being more important than Julius Caesar himself. So how did the idea of writing this book come to your mind?
Well, I think that when we look at objects, we can kind of... I actually just have to take a sip of water here for a second, folks. By the way, do we have any students here today? Do we have any students in the back? Okay, good. Well, I'm a teacher. I teach at the high school level. It's the greatest job that anyone could ever have. And being a teacher, I'm constantly auditioning for my students and trying to get them interested and engaged. Some of them are, and some of them hopefully will become. And one way I feel like we can do this with history is instead of, there's all kinds of history and there's all kinds of good approaches to history, and they're just different. And we're all kind of colleagues in this process of trying to waken people up. I feel like with props, by taking an object, I'm almost pulling a string on history. I'm kind of unraveling history. I'm getting very specific about something so that I can illuminate something larger at that moment. There's other books I want to write. For example, I'd like to write a book called Threads, which is just about 7 outfits during the course of history. So by looking at outfits, we can understand that moment in history as well. I think for myself and for often teenagers, having a concrete thing in front of them, an object, a diadem, a piece of chalk, it gives them something to hold on to. And then it allows us to explore. It's not meant to be authoritative. I'm not trying to settle anything. I'm just trying to awaken curiosity always. And so, again, my job allows me to audition every day, basically. And it allows me to see the light in students' eyes where I'm like, oh, they like that. That's great. I can use that. I can keep going on with that. And so in this case, it's an object, right? But we could pick anything. We could pick anything possibly. Just 200 yards away, there's Nehru's cell. I don't know if you saw that walking in, but where Nehru was incarcerated by the British. And just walking and looking inside that cell and looking at that window at the back of the cell really makes it much more real, right? It's tangible. This is a jail cell. This is where this person spent time. So I don't consider myself an authority on anything. I just consider myself a provocateur and just trying to awaken conversation, not settle anything. Objects are a way of doing this. By the way, just quickly, does anyone know who this is? Students? 20th century? No. I like that answer. You'll notice that there's an umbrella for the handle. That's kind of a hint. But no? All right. It's a hard one. It's Neville Chamberlain. His symbol was an umbrella. He was well known for carrying an umbrella, which was a prop that worked really well for him because it was a prop. It was a steadfast British thing to have an umbrella, right? But when he capitulated to Hitler in Munich in 1938, the umbrella became a symbol of weakness, actually. It became a symbol, a global symbol of weakness, political weakness. And there were many political leaders who refused to have photos taken of them with an umbrella after that. They said, get the umbrella out of the shot, get the umbrella out of the shot. So again, the umbrella is an example. It's just a starting point. It's not meant to settle anything, but it's a starting point in a conversation. We know that this cup was created before he met Hitler and capitulated to Hitler, right? They're not going to do a cup of Neville Chamberlain with an umbrella handle after that. So we can be pretty sure that it happened before that. It's just the beginning of an inquiry.
Thank you, Norm. And talking about props, all of us are sitting at this historic venue of Alipur Museum, which was the jail earlier. And who does not know about the prop of salt, which was used by Gandhi? Talking about Alipur Museum, the jail, the word that comes to my mind is boycott. Boycott was a word which was used during the Swadeshi movement in 1905 in West Bengal. And Sumanto's book, Stories of Words and Phrases, deals with these kind of words. Sumanto, would you like to straight away dive into the word boycott and how it comes forth?
Sure.
And what the origin of the word is?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, great. So I believe that words are actually living, breathing museums that we carry around with us. We don't think too much about, we know the meaning of the words we use, but we never stop to think where they came from. And once you do, you can, you become like a word detective because it's so fascinating. Take the word boycott. You all know what it means, right? So the word boycott, I'll first come to where it originated. It originated in Ireland in 1880. It was a year when crops failed over there, and there was a British absentee landlord who wanted to collect the taxes anyway. And the farmers, the peasant farmers, were begging him for a discount, and he refused to give it. And so what happened was they decided to not cooperate in that sense. And what happened was that they didn't cooperate, and somebody was sent in called Sir Charles Boycott to actually forcibly harvest the crops because these people refused to harvest their own crops. And in the end, what happened was that to get crops worth 500 pounds, they had to spend, the British government spent 10,000 pounds to get the army and the police to stay guard, but they didn't realize that this boycott movement was a peaceful movement. They were not going to attack anybody. But what they decided to do when this happened was this Charles Boycott, who was actually getting the crops harvested, they boycotted him, as in they stopped cooperating with him. The local shops refused to serve him. His domestic help refused to work. So that's where the word boycott comes from. 1880, 25 years later, 1905, as you know, that's when the British divided Bengal along communal lines, 1905. And the intelligentsia in Calcutta were completely against this, so they went to the city hall in in then Calcutta, and they drew up a resolution to boycott British goods like sugar, salt, cloth, and British institutions like courts, colleges, schools. And this is what finally snowballed into the Swadeshi movement, which was an integral part of our freedom struggle. So every time you use the word boycott, it may sound like a simple word, but it carries such a rich history. And like I said, every word is a living museum like this, and that's very appropriate given that we are sitting on the premises of the old Alipur Museum. And shall I mention? So I would like to talk to you about a very personal connection that I have with this museum, which is that my grandmother was imprisoned here in the late 40s. She was not a criminal. She was a political activist. There was something called the Mohila Atmarokha Shomiti, the Women's Self-Defense Association. Basically, she had seen the famine that had taken place in Bengal, and she'd seen the rising fascism all over the world, and including in India. And so they formed an organization to combat that. And they were closely affiliated with the Communist Party of India, which was banned at that time. So because of that, she, along with many other women leaders, were imprisoned here. And she was here for a year. And she led a 51-day hunger strike to get her and all the other women prisoners out. And the reason thank you. No credit to me, but the way, I have a very special connection with this story because when I was my grandmother was also a singer. My grandmother's name, by the way, was Manjushree Tagore. She was from the Tagore family. And she used to try to, I can't sing, but she used to try to teach me how to sing Robindra Sangeet. And her Gito Bitan, the book of Tagore songs, it said censored and passed by jail authorities or something like that. And I asked her, what is this? So she said, that's because I was in jail. And she used to wear thick glasses. She said, because of the hunger strike, my eyes got permanently damaged. So anyway, this is a very personal story, but I had to say it because we are sitting here at those very premises. Thank you.
No, she was a public figure, and as long as we are sitting here at Alipur Museum, that story is very relevant, also in the context of the British who colonized India. And of course, everyone sitting over here knows that the Swadeshi movement led to the political decision of the British to actually withdraw the partition of Bengal and finally transfer the capital from Kolkata to Delhi. So most of our history, the ancient history, I was coming to you. It's fair to come to you first and then move to. So most of our history has actually been, mostly in the past, has been written by Europeans, especially the British. It has been dominated by that perspective. And there are certain, also if you look at the archaeological past of India, the excavations were conducted conducted by the British officers, and they propagated certain themes which became a part of history, which was read by us in our textbooks, which is called academic history. And then we have the stream of popular history, which we are discussing over here. And Prateek Dasgupta has made some startling revelations in his book, where he claims that there was a civilization which existed in the Indian subcontinent, and it predated the Harappan civilization. How many of you have heard of something like this? So, Prateek, let's hear it from the horse's mouth, borrowing your phrase.
So, before we proceed to discussing Mehergarh, one small anecdote, since we were discussing about British and props on that theme, I noticed that most people here, except a few women who are wearing saris, everybody is wearing pants, right? So we tend to associate pants with the British or the Western influence that came to India. But actually, pants or trousers were invented in the Eurasian steppes. The oldest one you can find, it was found in a cemetery in present-day Xinjiang, which was earlier called East Turkestan. And from there, today, all over the world, almost every culture wears pants. And at one point of time in history, we saw pants as being uncivilized. Like if you see every major civilization, Egypt, India, China, Arabs, Persians, I'll get to Persians later. Romans, Greeks, they all wore unstitched clothes because it was considered uncivilized to wear pants. And today, this is the hallmark of civilization. So this is the influence that the people of Eurasian steppes had on us. And also, if you see the trouser belts, these were invented in the Eurasian steppes. So my book tries to challenge these popular narratives that we have about history, about the ideas of civilization. And as Amitabh said, before Harappa, you had in the same region, in present-day Balochistan, you had this civilization. I won't call it civilization, but the starter, I would rather call it as a starter to the Harappan culture called Mehergarh. And these remarkable people were the first to domesticate cotton anywhere in the world. And using Stone Age tools, they were also practicing dentistry. So these people were really remarkable, and Harappa we associated with the lost wax casting process, which many of you may have seen at the Indian Museum, the dancing girl of Mohenjo-daro. This process was actually dated to the Mehergarh people, who were the first to do it. So like Mehergarh, Mehergarh comes under the dawn of civilization in my book, which is like the very first layers of human civilization. And the entire book is dedicated to exploring lesser known chapters of the past, which can challenge common perceptions that where civilizations began, who built the first pyramids, whether cities existed in North America before Europeans, these kind of stuff.
Interesting, and we'll come to if somebody has challenged you with your what you have propounded. We'll come to that later. I'll move to Norm. He talked about the umbrella prop and the connection with Chamberlain, and then the following connection with JFK and so on. When you were doing your, when you were selecting the props to present in your book, did you follow a method? And if you did, which one is the most interesting one, and that was actually the single largest factor in changing or shaping the course of history?
Well, so that's a great question. I'm not known for my methodology, to be honest with you. A little bit of a wild card. So I think that that could be a strength of the book or a weakness of the book, depending on how you see it. The props kind of function in different ways in different chapters. Some of them in the second chapter are about Martin Luther. It's an actual prop from a film about Martin Luther. I think the most interesting prop in this book is a piece of chalk. I could really think about a piece of chalk. It's just one of the oldest minerals in the world, this soft thing. And where that chalk came into play is that Vladimir Lenin, you guys know Vladimir Lenin was the Russian revolutionary, right? Vladimir Lenin had a problem. He had a problem because when the Russian Revolution broke out, he wasn't in Russia. He was in exile. He was in Switzerland. And he had to get from Switzerland back to Russia. And he had all this kind of, well, I'm going to put on a wig. I'm going to put on a wig. I'll go to England. They won't notice me. And then I'll jump over to Sweden and I'll get into Russia. But it turned, and he had this other crazy plan. He was like, I'm going to pretend to be a mute. I'm going to pretend I don't know how to speak. And then I'm going to go on a train. And then his wife reminded him, Vladimir, at night, you swear out loud while you're sleeping. They're going to figure out that you're Russian. But what he ended up doing, this is really fascinating, is in Switzerland, they made a deal. It's kind of complicated. You have to look at the book. But they made a deal with the Kaiser. Okay, now the Kaiser is one of the most conservative figures of the 20th century, right? It's about as far away you can get from a Marxist was the Kaiser, Kaiser Wilhelm. Vladimir Lenin made a deal with the Kaiser because the Kaiser thought, gee, wouldn't it be great if we could get Lenin back into Russia? That would be just so wonderful because this guy is such a pain in the butt and he's going to cause so much trouble if we can just get him back into Russia. And so the Kaiser thought, let's help this guy get back into Russia because he's going to bring Russia down to his knees. And we're going to get him out of the war. And believe it or not, this happens. This is like one of the great gambles of all time. So what the Kaiser said to Lenin, he said, I'll get you across Germany. I'm going to get you across Germany. I'm going to put you in a train, and you guys might know about this, called the sealed train. We're going to put you in a train car with some of your buddies, You can sing the Marseillaise the whole way, okay? You can have a great time. And Lenin was a real pain on that trip, too. He outlawed smoking on the train because he didn't like smoking. So he said, you can't smoke cigarettes except in the bathroom. It was a big ordeal. But Lenin had a problem because here he's taking a train ride from the Kaiser across Germany. Lenin knows that when he gets to Russia, when Lenin gets to Russia, his revolutionary buddies are going to say to him, how'd you get here, right? And that's a real problem because he's going to be like, well, actually, I got a ride from the Kaiser. That is not going to sound good to his Marxist revolutionary buddies. And so what Lenin does, the way he resolves this, and this is Lenin's genius. There's no question Lenin was a genius. He took a piece of chalk. And he drew a line down the center of the train car. And he said, this side of the train is Germany. We're in Germany on a German train. This side of the train is German. This side of the train is not Germany. It's Russia. This part of the train is not German. It's Russia. We're in Russia. Russia is moving across Germany on one half of a train car. That's where we are, just with a piece of chalk, just laying that piece of chalk down the middle. Now, any reasonable person would say, you're insane. There's no way that you're not in Germany, Lenin, right? This is a German train in Germany. But it gives Lenin just enough plausible deniability that when he gets to Russia, he can say, I was in Russia. You know, I don't know what to tell you. We were in Russia. I identified it as Russian. It's very thin, right? Anyone would look at that and say, you're out of your mind. But events move so quickly once he gets back to Russia, it doesn't matter. And he knows this. He doesn't have to come up with a good reason. He just has to come up with a reason. And just so you know, if you ever want to cut someone in line, you don't have to give them a good reason. You just give them a reason. And they're like, oh, okay. You know, if I go up to a line in an airport and say, I got to get ahead of you because I have an itch in my left shoulder, people are like, okay, go ahead. And that's what Lenin basically does. He gives just a thin enough of excuse that when he gets to Russia, people are like, I don't know how he got here. I guess he got a ride from the Kaiser, but there's a piece of chalk. And so I just love that because what is simpler than a piece of chalk? This is the most base element, softest element in the world. So for me, that's the most interesting object in the book.
Chalk and Lenin and John Lennon, music, Beatles. So Kolkata is a musical city. And I'm sure all of you are aware of this form of writing poetry where you use 3 lines, haiku. There's another format of poetry, short poems. It's called limerick. You know about limerick? Sumanto has dealt in detail about limerick. Sumanto, would you like to, are you ready to talk about limerick? Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So yeah, limericks are poems with 5 lines. The first, second, and the 5th line are longer and they rhyme with each other. And the 3rd and 4th lines are shorter and they rhyme with each other. And they're usually humorous, sometimes a bit naughty, but they are a very old form of poetry. There's somebody called Edward Lear who's considered the father of the limerick. He came up with many interesting limericks in a book called The Book of Nonsense, because very often limericks are nonsense that is fun. His limericks were so popular at one time, they were called, his surname was Lear, so they called them lyrics because of that. So let me try and remember. One of his limericks is, there was a young lady from Niger who smiled as she rode on a tiger. They returned from the ride with the lady inside and the smile on the face of the tiger. So yeah, so there are many, and there are many limericks that start with, there was a young lady. And some of them are quite naughty, so I won't get into those. But even many of us, especially me, in nursery school, we learnt something which was a limerick. Does anybody know what that would be? What is the nursery school limerick? Yeah. I can't hear. Okay, we'll do that. Okay, we'll do it later. Yeah. Okay, so there's something called hickory dick that goes hickory dickory dock. The mouse ran up the clock. The clock struck one, the mouse came. The clock struck one, and down he run, hickory dickory dock. So that's the earliest limerick that many of us learn at a very young age. These actually started out in the 1600s or even earlier as drinking songs. So when men went to the pub to drink, they would sing these songs, or just to have fun. So there's a place. So where does this word limerick come from? Do you know? Which country? It comes from Ireland, right? So there's a place called Limerick in Ireland where this form was popularized. And there's a book of very, very old limericks which were written in Irish and then later translated into English, where there was repartee between the drinkers and the pub owners. Let me try and remember. So there was one guy called Sean O'Twama who had a pub. And so he recites this particular, let me look it up in my book so I don't get it wrong. So he says one day at his pub, I sell the best brandy and sherry to make all my customers merry. But at times their finances run short as it chances, and then I feel very sad, very. So this is what he says, and everybody cheers, all his customers cheers. But there's one guy who's standing very quietly, not amused at this at all. Then he comes to the front and he recites another limerick, which goes, O'Twama. O'Twama is the name of the pub owner. He says, and the person who's reciting it, his name is Andy McGrath. So he says, O'Twama, you boast yourself handy at selling good ale and bright brandy. But the fact is your liquor makes everyone sicker. I tell you this, I, your friend Andy. So basically, this is the kind of repartee that happened with limericks. And yeah, so I think that I won't go on with any more, but there are many such limericks. You can look them up. They're in my book, and there are many other books of limericks as well.
So that was an actor first, a stage artist first, turned into an author, talking to you about limericks.
And interestingly, both the words that you've got me to discuss today, both come from Ireland. Boycott as well as limerick.
And one of them has a Bengal connection.
One of them has a Bengal connection.
So from limericks, we move on to this very interesting object that Prateek Dasgupta has on the cover of his book. If you could please hold it up. So this is a symbol, an artifact from a civilization called the Oxus.
Oxus, yeah.
Oxus. So we know about the great river civilizations of the world. And we didn't know about Oxus, this civilization. So I'm sure all of you are aware of the Indus Valley civilization, the Egyptian civilization, the Chinese civilization, the Mesopotamian civilization, and then there is Oxus. This is also a first, a revelation which has come through your book and through your research.
I won't say I'm the first to write about it. It was published in several archaeology journals before. But in popular history, Oxus is seldom covered. So Oxus was the Greek name for the river Amu Darya, which flows through Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and then Tajikistan. And between Amu Darya and the Mugrab rivers, this civilization thrived. So they were contemporaries of Indus Valley civilization. And in the early stages, archaeologists didn't even, like the artifacts were showing up, the archaeologists didn't even think this was a different civilization. They just thought that they were outposts of Indus Valley. So I was really fascinated by this archaeologist called Victor Sarianidi because he was in the Soviet Union and wanted to study law. And but he refused to take the membership of Communist Party. So they asked him to go and study history, and he felt it was too politicized. And then he went to archaeology, and he said that archaeology is more liberating, it is more free than history because it is like there's not much political interference. So this gentleman in the Karakum Desert, which is about 2/3 of Turkmenistan's landmass, he kept digging for close to 3 decades, revealing us these fantastic cities that existed along the banks of Amu Darya and Mugrab. And one of these artifacts that you see in the book, this is an axe head. And here you will see a man with a double-headed eagle wrestling with a lion-like creature in one hand and a boar-like creature in another. So the influences are most likely from the Jiroft and Elam civilizations of Iran, which were close trading partners of Oxus. And Indus Valley civilization was also a very close trading partner. But this was the fifth river valley civilization in the old world, or what we call, like in my book, I challenge the idea that we shouldn't be using the terms old world and new world, because I have written about Caral Supe in Peru, which was contemporaneous to Egypt, and some of the pyramids were even older than Egypt's. So there was a fifth river valley civilization of the old world. That was the Oxus civilization, also known as Bactria Margiana archaeological complex. That is out of respect to the archaeologist who discovered it. And yeah.
Yeah, so if you give out any more information, people will not feel the need to buy your book. So that was a prop.
Yeah.
Prop for you to buy a copy of all these books and get them signed after this session. Talking about props takes me back to Norm Coady. Norm, there are props that you've used in the book, but there would be some props which you would have liked to introduce to the book, or perhaps they have come to your mind after you published this one. So would you like to pick one and talk about it?
Yeah, sure. We were talking earlier at breakfast, and I was on the travel here, I was thinking about Gandhi, of course, and Gandhi's was a great wielder of props. He was a genius when it came to political theater, whether it's the Salt March, whether it's his walking cane, whether it's homespun. But another prop that I came very close to writing about were the cartridges in the Sepoy Rebellion, right? If we remember the Sepoy Rebellion, part of that was sparked because the Royal Enfield rifle had wax cartridges that you would have to tear off and bite to put the gunpowder into the gun, right? And a rumor spread amongst the Sepoys that this wax was from pig and cow fat. So you can imagine how bad that would be, because it's not just that there's wax paper there, it's wax paper you're biting into. And so I did do some research into it. First of all, the Sepoy Rebellion is such a fascinating moment, and we talked about how this was the beginning in India of religious divide, intentionally created, and I talked a little bit about Bacon's Rebellion in America, which was a similar thing with race. But I did do some research into these cartridges, and it's hard to know for sure. I don't consider myself a historian that can figure things out. That's not really the way I see my job. I have a different kind of job. But I did look into the cartridges themselves, and there's still debate about whether there was pig or cow grease on that wax. There's a lot of historians who feel like that the Brahmins who were creating the wax cartridges wouldn't have used that it was a Brahmin family that was actually creating the wax. But again, it doesn't really matter, does it? It makes it interesting that we have this argument about whether that wax was made out of pig or cow fat. But at that moment, the Sepoys recognized and seized upon the fact that it might as well be, right? I'm not a big believer in truth. I think most of history moves through lies, actually. And they're useful lies. The Sepoys at that moment, there probably were Sepoys who would have recognized that there probably wasn't pig or cow fat on the cartridges. It didn't matter. History had to move forward, and if that rumor was useful, then it should be applied, and it was applied. So I did come close to writing about that in this book, and yes, I just walked back there, and I saw homespun looms, which is another great prop that Gandhi used. It's not just a prop, right? The idea of homespun cloth is self-sufficiency in the face of industrial England. It's such a smart thing. It's such a judo move, right? Whether it's collecting salt from the ocean or creating your own cloth. But that wheel is an intentional prop. It's an intentional symbol. There's other ways to create cloth that are faster, okay? Like you don't need to use that wheel to create cloth. I mean, you can do it in your home with something that looks like that. It didn't matter. Gandhi recognized that that object was a visual cue to people, a really powerful visual cue. And I think of all the people of the 20th century, I think Gandhi was the greatest practitioner of using objects, of any of them, except maybe, you know, his rival might be Hitler or Mao. But when we look at the end of the day of what was established by those people, it's pretty clear that what Gandhi was able to establish was bright and true, opposed to the others. Yeah.
So Kolkata and AKLF is giving you a reason to write a sequel to your book. Perhaps you may title it More Props. And the case of grease cartridges made by the Enfield company brings me to a phrase, biting the bullet. Biting the bullet has been used by Sumanto in his book. And if you could take us briefly, because now we are getting very close to opening the session to the audience, what the origin of the phrase is and what it actually means.
Right. So before that, I just want to mention, you know, we talked about salt as a prop. There's a word that related to money, which is very important to all of us, which comes from the word salt. Do you know what that is? Salary. The word salary comes from salt because at one time people were paid, it was such a valuable commodity that workers were paid in salt. So coming to bite the bullet, it actually comes from the British Army where there are many theories, but the most accepted theory is the fact that if somebody was injured and then they had to maybe get stitched up or have some other kind of minor surgery, they didn't have anesthetic available to them. So they would literally bite the bullet to stop themselves from screaming. That was one aspect of it. The other aspect was that if they were being punished for whatever misdemeanor while in the army, they would be flogged, and it was a matter of pride not to scream out. So there again, they would supposedly bite the bullet. So today, biting the bullet, I suppose you know what it means, that, you know, when you have to do something difficult, and you just say, okay, let me just bite the bullet and do it. So that's how it's used today.
Interesting. Or else someone like me would have thought biting the bullet came from the Sepoy mutiny. That was the origin of the phrase. Prateek, I mean, every page of your book and every chapter of your book gives us some new information to delve upon and perhaps read more into it. And as per that coverage of your book by The Hindu, somebody said, whoever wrote the article, that every chapter can be developed into a new book. So if you were to write a new book on popular history, using one of the chapters over here, which one that would be?
I might be a little biased, but for me, if I have to start with a new book, it's going to be the Xiongnu Empire. So that was, like in the common terminology, it is easier to say Huns. The history of the Huns was quite fascinating because for a long time, people were not sure if the Xiongnu, which were the traditional rivals of imperial China, whether they were Huns. And another great impact they had on, before Huns came to India, was they pushed the Kushans out, whom I have also covered in the book. The Kushans came and ruled India, and even now if you visit the Indian Museum, you'll see a huge collection of Gandhara art. And once upon a time, the Kanishka's headless statue also was present there before they moved it to Mathura. And the Kushans ruled all the way up to Mathura. So if I had to start off with just one chapter, it would be the Huns, because they impacted world history in a number of ways which we still haven't fully grasped. The migrations that they caused towards the east and the west, and how they shaped up the entire Chinese history. Like, for example, Chinese went in search of what I call the heavenly horses or the blood-sweating horses. the Gandhara School of Art, yeah, of course, if the cushions hadn't moved out, the Gandhara School of Art, actually the Greeks had started it in Central Asia. The cushions just propelled it to a different level, like merging even more elements, Indian elements, Bactrian elements, and cushions played a huge role in popularizing Buddhism all across Central Asia, and through that, through the Silk Road trade, it enters China. So all of these can be traced back to the Han Zhongnu War, which starts somewhere around 200 BC. And then you have this guy called Modu, whose real name may have been Baghatur. Baghatur is how you pronounce it in Mongolian, from which you get the Persian word Bahadur. Bahadur, or in Urdu or Hindi, it's also called Bahadur. So his name may have been Bahadur. And this guy was like the Chinggis Khan of the ancient world. And he ended up building an empire which was twice the size of Alexander's. So, but barely mentioned in history, barely you come across in any text. So that would be my first book if I had to
Excellent.
start one.
Yeah, also, we see a parallel in Buddhist literature of the penance between Ashoka. He went through a process of
Yes.
penance, and so did Kanishka. I mean, there's a reference, whether
There
it's
is a
true or not,
reference.
we do not know. So, Norm, there's a lot of you in, lot of Norm Coady in your book, which comes from the perspective of being a history teacher who teaches history for fun. So you have a great sense of humor, and it's unfair for me to give you to ask you to give a quick response to the paper cup inclusion in your book. And after that, we'll open the session to the audience.
Okay, well, thanks for being unfair. I really appreciate you having us here, so you're doing a great job. There was a paper cup. Let's keep it simple, folks. One morning I went into work. I was teaching at a very tough school, and I had a cup of coffee in my hand, a paper cup of hot coffee in my hands, and the tough kids were just over there, and one of them started coming up to me like this, like he was going to punch me, but like in a fun way, right? Like he was like playing with me, and I loved that, of course, because I just thought, oh, this guy likes me, right? And this is cool. One of my students likes me. So I'm sitting there with the coffee cup, and he comes up to me, and I go to punch him, right? Just fake punch him. And I hit his boot with my boot. I just hit it lightly. It was just an accident. Anyway, 5 seconds later, he's back with his friends. And he says, Coady just hit my boot with his boot. Like he's acting really angry. And I'm just thinking, he's just playing. We're just having fun right here. So I walk up to him, and I get right in front of him because I want more of this, right? I'm really enjoying this. I look at him, and I take my boot, and I put it right on top of his boot really lightly. And at that moment, he stood there with his friends watching what had happened. And I could see him thinking. What should I do right now? And I put him in this bad position. It was not intentional. I was just having fun. He was thinking about what to do. And then 2 seconds later, he went, and he smacked the hot cup of coffee out of my hand. And the hot coffee went all over me. And I thought at that moment, I'm in big trouble. Like, I'm in big trouble right now. I've just done something that made him do that to me. And so that's part of the book, is following that paper cup story through the book. Because like any object, whether it's a diadem or a paper cup, it doesn't matter. You guys have objects of your own from your history, don't you? Go home, go into your room, look at the objects in your room. What do they mean to you? They're all laden with meaning. We have objects that we have fought over with our friends, with our family. It's nothing different. Julius Caesar, Martin Luther, Vladimir Lenin, they're not different from you. They're the same as you. But we have our own objects, and we have our own stories with them. So the paper cup is that story in the book.
Thank you. So we'll open the session to the audience, and I'll try and club the questions if they are similar. Please try and ask questions of every single author who's sitting on my right. Can someone get the mics to the audience? So one, okay. I can see 1, 2, 3 hands. Yeah.
Hello. Hi, my name is Rita. I have a question for all of the panelists today. We have seen across history that there are certain chapters which are, albeit very, very interesting, and it teaches us a lot, but there is a mandatory somehow, they have deliberately made it absent from our books. Like only one part is focused while the others are not, and everybody is equally important. Like you cannot just say the part A is important and part B, C, and D are not there. That's not the case. So many contemporary history are kind of obliterated in a way, and we don't know much about it. So like how can we, if there's an interest in it, how can we venture out? Because it's a very sensitive in terms as well, certain information are. So if someone wants to venture into those parts of the world history, how can they do it standing in 2026?
So you're talking about representation of history through textbooks that
Yeah,
are...
mostly textbooks.
Okay, fine. So we'll come to that. And any more questions?
Hi, my question is for Sumanto. I'm a big fan and I follow you on Insta also. Your page goes by the name English Nut. I just wanted to understand one thing. It's just funny, the question is pretty funny. Is that English goes with what you do? Why the name Nut in it?
Okay, so we'll come to that. And there was one more hand at the back. There's one more hand raised at the back, just behind you. Okay, there's someone here in the front row.
Hi everyone, wonderful session. This is so enigmatic to learn everything. But my question is for Sumanto, again, a big fan, and I'm an English literature student. So, of course, all excitement. Can you give any example of either a word or a phrase which has changed over time? I mean, we are talking about a lot of sources of words which, you know, we use it because it was used and it's similar, the parlance may be similar, but is there any word or phrase which has changed, the usage of the source and the usage now has changed over time? Anything like that?
That's a very interesting question, and incidentally, it finds a mention in his book. We'll come to that. There are two questions for Sumanto.
Thank you.
And there's one on uneven representation of history in textbooks. Let's take one more.
Hello. So my question is that if we are to read today's time as a history for the future, what would be one prop which can define our times, like for the future students?
Okay, great. So now there is an even representation in terms of questions that have been asked by the audience to these great authors who are sitting on my right. So there's one question on prop, uneven representation of history. Prateek, I request you to take that one. And then there are questions directly for Sumanto. So let's start with, and please be brief in your response. So let's talk about uneven representation of history in textbooks.
So much of my book covers uneven representation of histories, because one thing about history is records, people who were literate, people who kept records. If you think about humanity's history, writing is very recent development, and most of the world learned writing maybe by 19th century or so. So much of the history that we have is unwritten. So the best place to start off would be through objects, ruins, and maybe oral histories. Some popular authors, they write about that. You can pick up clues from that. Like from my book, if something strikes you, you can always go deeper by looking at the bibliography that I have. I would say that is a good way to approach underrepresented histories.
So there are a lot of these young historians who are writing about various subjects in various times, regions, and so on. You can pick one book, and perhaps that can be a window for you, and then you can go further and delve further, deeper into academic books. The prop question, I'll come to you right in the end.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'm going to just keep it brief, and I will say Donald Trump's here. And not just Donald Trump's here, not just Donald Trump's here, but there's been a trend of a certain hairstyle amongst populists in the world, in Argentina and England, that's very messy and big and seemingly at odds with an authoritarian look, right? We know authoritarian looks would be more like Stalin, no sideburns. But I do find that that hair trend in the world that seems to be politically aligned to be quite fascinating. I'd like to write about that, yeah.
Thank you, Norm. And for Sumanto, we have two questions. Why nut in his name, the English nut? And which phrase or word has changed its meaning or it has been obliterated over time? That was your question. Please answer.
Yeah,
both.
so to answer the first one, it's not nut as in peanuts or cashew nuts. It's nut as in somebody who's, you can either say I'm nuts about something to mean I'm crazy about it or I'm obsessed with it. So I've often said on my channel that English is nuts and I'm nuts about English. So that's the reason I'm the English nut. Thank you. And to answer the second question, there are many, many words. So I was actually looking through my table of contents to see. So for example, the word gossip, we all know what it means today. But it started out to mean something like godfather or godmother. You know, in Christianity, when a child is baptized, you know, they have a godmother or god. So somebody close to the family who sort of becomes a sponsor for that child. And that's where it started. And possibly when there was childbirth, the women would get together and talk during the long labor period. And from that, somehow, it's become what it means today. So that's what. Another word that I can think of is sinister, which comes from the Latin word sinistra, which just means left. Like dexter and sinister are right and left. But over time, it developed a sinister meaning, a negative meaning, because there's a lot of beliefs about the left side. And this comes from the fact that in ancient Rome, there was a practice called augury, where these priests would predict things depending on the flight path of a bird, for example. If it flew right, something good was going to happen. If it flew left, or if your right ear was buzzing, it meant people were saying something good, and if your left ear was buzzing, they were saying something bad. So this is how sinistra, which just purely meant left, came to mean something a little bit more negative and sinister. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumanto. Thank you, Norm and Prateek. I had fun on stage. I hope you enjoyed yourself too. And I hope there was even representation of each author in terms of the questions that were asked. And I hope all of you enjoyed the session. Thank you very much.